Well, he always used to say that
If we want to catch the little fish, we don't have to go so deep. But if you want to catch the big fish, you've got to go deeper.
sometimes the little fish at the surface can be just as fascinating. With his last major work being an 18-hour project equivalent to a blue whale, some may not expect that the late great David Lynch actually has a rather expansive catalog of short films that even some of his diehard fans may not know about. You've probably seen him on Netflix talking to a monkey suspected of murder,
There was blood everywhere.
create the most unsettling sitcom of all time in the Inland Empire related Rabbits, or watch the man cook quinoa for 20 minutes straight.
We're cooking quinoa.
David often inserted himself into his own work, and him doing something is kind of a whole subgenre within his oeuvre itself. Like the aforementioned quinoa cooking short, David Lynch building a lamp in 2003, which is kind of a precursor to the DIY YouTube videos that he'd upload in recent years, Lynch working on some other things,
The disc of sorrow has been installed.
David on a boat with Bushnell Keeler about 40 years earlier, David nursing a double-leg amputated log lady, David talking to Barbie.
Hi, David.
Oh, and also voicing Barbie, which Mattel actually managed to get censored because it was essentially just an ad for his signature cup coffee. Or David Lynch filming Blue Bob getting arrested in broad daylight in front of our very eyes. I honestly have no clue what this is. Blue Bob is apparently a moniker under which Lynch made some music, and here this character is getting arrested. It's honestly pretty funny in retrospect. Sometimes Lynch was really just a silly troll, and this is honestly just really hilarious, so whatever. The variety of ideas he managed to express in the short form is seemingly endless, and within these minor works there are a lot of seeds being planted that would eventually grow into his stylistic and thematic trademarks. If you're looking to find a lot of the origins for his visual elements and the ways to shoot a scene, there's an entire subcategory of just pretty much one subject being presented in a myriad of ways, like Steps, which is just a staircase for a couple of minutes without much change at all, multiple shorts that are kind of just aesthetic exhibitions of industrial landscapes, obviously inspired by his time in Philadelphia, the same way that Eraserhead was, or just straight up nature time lapses. Most of these are compiled in a series titled Intervalometer Experiments. In all of these you can find traces of images that would eventually end up being implemented into the most surreal and almost liminal environments of The Return. Sometimes there was also action on screen, like this impressionistic ballerina dance video, or David simply filming a fight between a spider and a bee in his home with an ambient drone playing. I don't even know if I have to mention that, because pretty much all things here have dark ambient music in the background. And he really liked insects, it seems.
This is the story of a small bug.
Then there's Dead Mouse with Ants, whose title is, well, exactly what it says, or the beloved sequel, Anthead, in which Kyle MacLachlan is being devoured by a bunch of ants, his bravest role since Desperate Housewives. Or one with the ambiguous title, A Pig Walks. Ambiguous because how on earth is that a pig? This 2002 analog abomination could only come out of Lynch's mind. In general, his entire collection of animated shorts is something pretty underappreciated, I'd say. He's always been a primarily visual artist, and the very first thing that Lynch made was actually just something he did because he wanted to see his own paintings move. So we can only imagine what a full animated feature by Lynch would have looked like. Maybe his artistic expression could have been even wilder and less restricted if he had gotten the chance to do so. Some of these he even released a few years prior to his death, like Posar aka Fire, which showcases one of Lynch's most essential symbols, raging over a home in a devastating manner, which now unfortunately becomes something rather haunting considering Lynch had to evacuate his home shortly before his passing because of the recent LA wildfires. Yet there's also the flip side of that, his cartoony work, primarily featured in a series of shorts entitled Dumbland, consisting of 8 episodes filled with extremely vulgar and crude surrealism, solely hand-drawn, voiced, edited, and produced by Lynch himself. Fans of Don Hertzfeldt's early work are gonna have a field day with this one. It's really the most juvenile work that you're ever gonna see by him, but there's something so charming and amusing about these nonsensical cartoons that you're not gonna get from anything else in his filmography. Though the ridiculousness of the cowboy and the Frenchman actually comes pretty close.
By golly, Slim, he's got French fries.
While there's obviously lots of merit to many of these shorts I mentioned, I don't want it to seem like Lynch's short works are only these completely abstract and bizarre projects that lack substance, because there's actually a huge chunk of his shorts that manage to be very much worth your time. The Alphabet, based on a story told by his then wife Peggy Lance, whose niece was having a nightmare while repeating the alphabet over and over again, essentially portrays Lynch's interpretation of the dreams that the girl must have been having, and it offers the same complexly nightmarish web of sequences that is found within his most extreme films. It's an almost Dadaist work in its strangeness.
I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten green lights, but I got this fixation on it, and I really wanted to make the grandmother.
With being part animated and part live action, I think The Grandmother is the first of and one of few Lynch shorts that seems to be a lot more ambitious with its 34-minute runtime. The entire short doesn't really feature any true dialogue. It has sound and characters that vocally express themselves, but it is only through noises and repeating phrases. It starts with this crazy opening section that sort of mirrors the conception scene at the beginning of Eraserhead, just even wilder and more scrappy. In general, this entire film almost deals with the flip side of what Eraserhead did, more focusing on the turmoil of being a child rather than a father. There's generally a lot of abuse being depicted, once again emphasizing Lynch's knack for being an empathetic humanist rather than just a difficult surrealist. There are two people that somehow get created in this vision of growing agriculture, but once they are on Earth, they sort of behave like wild animals. And to do a similar thing, the main child grabs a bag of seeds, tries to figure out what sound each one makes, and once he finds one that makes a sound that is different from the rest of them, he puts it into his bed, fertilizes it, very much in line with the imagery of the humans emerging from the ground at the beginning, and just sort of takes care of what he planted. It then becomes a massive cocoon-esque form from which he essentially harvests his own grandmother, who becomes his first source of affection, who he returns to when he's horribly treated by his parents. It's one of those rare instances of warmth that wonderfully work in contrast to his otherwise rather cold and barren worlds. Though even that story doesn't necessarily end on a joyful note and just sort of spirals into the despair of reality towards the end. There's a very sincere sadness it leaves you with, though it has that sort of ethereal hopefulness that a lot of his early work had.
I wrote this script. It was very dense and short, and it had no form like a regular script. It might have been 8 pages long. And it had sentences, only, like it was broken down into lines of sentences.
I think especially that era of his career is so special because it kind of showcases how much of an effect his thick atmosphere and bizarre imagery can have on you, even when the actual substance of the work is very ambiguous or slim. It gives you enough to work with to get a basic sense of linear storytelling to attach to, while still offering so much room for interpretation. Similarly to this one is also Absurd Encounter with Fear, which is a mere 2 minutes long but somehow manages to precede a lot of his stylistic trademarks. It's essentially just a man approaching a young woman on a field with a very tense string piece scoring it. And once he gets behind her, he tries to unzip his pants, and you obviously expect the worst, but he just pulls out a bundle of daisies out of his pants. Now, you don't really know what to feel. It's just a mixture of the surreal, absurd, and fear, while also having that weirdly sexual layer to it that makes it distinctly Lynchian. It is such an odd mix of romantic innocence and depravity that it makes for a compelling short despite being the length of 2 TikToks. For a filmmaker known to sometimes linger on an actionless shot for an effectively excruciating amount of time, he had an extraordinary skill for density and using brevity to its utmost potential, like in Premonitions Following an Evil Deed, which basically only consists of about a minute of footage, but inside of that minute is actually so much to gauge. So the police is going towards a house, and the short ends with an officer knocking at a door of a woman expecting the worst. But the most perplexing images are the two shots in between the bookend parts of the story. One with a group of 3 women lying on a bed seemingly in the woods with a deer next to them, and another shot that features a naked woman within some sort of liquid tank, with some experimenting doctors around her, obviously the most shocking part of this short. With all these things combined, you essentially get a mystery, crime, horror, science fiction drama, because you have no clue what anything actually means here. The main story with the police actually mirrors some of the same emotions that are manifested within the first episode of Twin Peaks, though it is actually more of an echo if anything else, because while it may not look like it, it was actually made 5 years after the pilot. It was originally made for the Lumiere and Company project, which challenged directors with the task to make a silent short, applying only the technology that the Lumiere brothers had back at the end of the 19th century, and Lynch adapts to the efficiency of composition that the very earliest visionaries in the history of cinema had to utilize. One fascinating point to mention is that a majority, close to the entirety of the shorts that I talk about here, consist of little to no actual dialogue, only music, sound effects and soundscapes. It really sheds a light on the fact that he's always been a director first and writer second. One can only wonder what Twin Peaks would have looked like if he had never gotten Mark Frost to collaborate on it. While this video covered and reflected a large amount of his work, there's still a lot more to explore, and some of these aren't even easy to access online. A few of these were still referenced by Lynch just a couple of years ago. I mean, this dumb short of Eli Roth playing puppeteer with gloved balloon puppets was seemingly so noteworthy to him that he named an important character in The Return after it. With these, Lynch could see his ideas going even more free and out there. For an already boundary-pushing filmmaker, this framework of even less limitations was something rather liberating, it seems. So without these, he may have never made any of his major works. And in a lot of ways, these shorts show that sometimes the small fishies are also worth catching, even if you only want to use them as bait to catch the bigger ones.
I am not going fishing, Mom.